My brother set me up with an apartment and my parents supported and financed him behind my back. I'm a 27-year-old man named Clarence, and for most of my life, I believed my brother, Vernon, who was 30, and I shared a bond closer than most siblings. Growing up, we did everything together, sharing our parents' attention, diving into mutual hobbies, and even cohabiting in the same apartment after college. So, when Vernon suddenly announced he was relocating overseas, I was convinced he was joking. But he wasn't. And the manner in which he handled it left me reeling. It all began during a routine family dinner at our parents' house, a monthly tradition we rarely missed. I was in the midst of passing the mashed potatoes when Vernon casually dropped the bombshell. "Linda and I are moving abroad in 2 months," he said nonchalantly. Just like that. No prior warning. No heads up. My fork nearly slipped from my hand. Our parents were equally taken aback. Mom's face fell, and Dad blinked in confusion. The room was silent for a moment before Mom finally found her voice. "You're moving where?" she asked, her tone a mix of surprise and concern. Vernon, acting as if he hadn't just delivered life-altering news, smiled. "London. Linda received a job offer there, and I found a great opportunity too. It's all happening pretty fast, but we're excited." Linda sat beside him, grinning as if they'd just announced an engagement rather than a complete upheaval of their lives. I looked at Vernon, expecting him to turn to me, to offer some personal acknowledgement or assurance. But he didn't. He just continued eating, as if nothing had changed. Mom looked genuinely hurt. "Why are we just now hearing about this?" Vernon shrugged, barely looking up. Didn't want to say anything until it was official. I could see the disappointment in Mom's eyes. "You've known for months and didn't think to tell us?" Linda chimed in, her tone sweet but with an undertone that always felt slightly condescending. "We didn't want to worry anyone before we were sure. It didn't sit right with me. Vernon and I had always confided in each other, or so I thought. Apparently, our entire family, our friends, everyone had been an afterthought. Then it hit me, the apartment. Vernon and I had been splitting the rent on our 2-bedroom place for years. With him moving out, I'd either have to find a new roommate or cover the entire rent myself, neither of which were appealing options. I waited until we were back at our apartment to bring it up. "So, what's the plan with the apartment?" I asked, striving to keep my voice even. Vernon barely looked up from his phone. "Oh yeah, you'll figure something out." That was it. No offer to help, no concern about how I'd manage. Just a casual dismissal, as if it wasn't his problem. I stared at him. "You couldn't have given me more of a heads up?" He finally looked up, annoyed. "Dude, it's not a big deal. You can find a new place or get a roommate. You're acting like I'm leaving you stranded." I wanted to argue, to tell him that after my recent breakup, one he'd supported me through, I wasn't in the best place to deal with a sudden housing crisis. But what was the point? He'd made up his mind. The next few days were tense. Our parents kept expressing their disappointment, but Vernon brushed it off. He acted like he'd done nothing wrong. Then Mom threw out the worst suggestion possible. "Why don't you just move back home?" The thought alone made my skin crawl. I hadn't lived at home since college, and moving back in at 27 felt like a massive step backward. But to Mom, it was the obvious solution. "At least until you figure things out," she said. I refused. There was no way I was doing that. I'd rather struggle to cover rent than give up my independence. The news also blindsided our friends. A few of them had known about Vernon's plans weeks in advance, which only made me feel even more like an afterthought. "I thought he told you," one of them said when I brought it up. "You guys are always together." Apparently not. Then, of course, Linda got involved. I received a message from her out of nowhere. "Hey, I really think you should stop making this about you. Vernon's excited about this, and you should be happy for him." It made my blood boil. I hadn't been complaining to anyone, just venting in a private online forum to clear my head. But somehow, she found out. Vernon wasn't much better. When I tried to talk to him, he just brushed it off. "I don't want drama before I leave." Drama. That's what he called it. Me being upset that he'd been planning this for months and never once thought to mention it. Me having to scramble to figure out my living situation. Me realizing that the brother I trusted had been keeping me in the dark. And the worst part? He didn't even care. A few days after the family dinner, my parents called me and asked if I'd come over to talk things through. I agreed, not because I expected resolution, but because some part of me still wanted to believe they'd see where I was coming from. The meeting was held at the same dining table where Vernon had dropped his bombshell. It was fitting. Everything started there, so maybe it made sense to try to sort it out there too. Mom started with a quiet voice, one she used when she was trying to calm things down. I don't like the tension between you and your brother. This isn't how I raised you too. For a second, I thought maybe she finally understood how badly this had been handled. But then she turned to me with that overly measured tone that made it clear she had already made up her mind. We all need to be happy for Vernon. That was it. That was her takeaway from everything. Dad nodded along, arms folded. He's got a great opportunity ahead of him. You shouldn't make this harder than it already is. I tried to stay calm. I told them again I wasn't upset that Vernon was moving. I was upset that he had known for months, said nothing, and left me with no time to plan. That I was suddenly left to figure out how to pay full rent. That he treated it like I was just someone he lived with, not someone he'd shared a life with. Vernon was there too. Silent. He didn't say a word, just sat there staring at his hands. But Linda? She took the chance to speak up. She was all smiles when she turned to me, like we were having a friendly chat. I think Clarence is just struggling with change. He's used to having Vernon around, and this is going to be an adjustment. I looked at Vernon, expecting him to say something, anything, but he didn't. He just picked at his plate, pretending the conversation didn't involve him. That's when Mom turned the blame on me. You've been relying too much on your brother. Maybe this is a chance for you to grow on your own. I blinked. I didn't choose to rely on him. We made this decision together, to live together, to share bills. Now he's leaving, and I didn't get a say. How is that my fault? But it was no use. To them, Vernon was chasing a dream. I was just the one left behind, bitter, apparently, and unwilling to be supportive. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I went over our shared expenses again. Vernon hadn't contributed to rent that month. It was due in less than a week. I checked our bank app, then messaged him. No reply. I called. He didn't pick up. Then came the text. I figured you'd be moving out too. Didn't see the point in continuing to pay. No warning. No discussion. Just another quiet decision made without me. That was the moment I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. I let my family know what had happened in our group chat. I figured they deserved to know how things really were. My cousin Reed, who rarely said much in family matters, finally spoke up. This isn't okay. Vernon, you left him hanging and didn't even tell him. That's not how you treat people. That opened the floodgates. My Aunt Jean chimed in, then a few other cousins. Some agreed with me. Others defended Vernon. Mom jumped in quickly to de-escalate, but it was too late. Vernon's response? He left the chat. Mom called me shortly after. You didn't have to make a scene. I stayed silent. You're making things harder for everyone. Can't you just let it go? That phrase stuck in my head. Let it go. As if I was throwing a tantrum over a lost toy and not a betrayal from someone I considered my closest person. Then I saw Vernon's newest post online, a smiling photo of him and Linda at the airport, bags packed, grins wide. New chapter begins today. So grateful for the journey ahead. He hadn't left yet, but emotionally? He'd been gone for months. And just like that, messages from friends began trickling in. Some were confused, they thought the move was temporary. A few were upset. He told us it was just for a short project, one said. He didn't say it was permanent. Apparently, I wasn't the only one left in the dark. Then I got a message from Linda. Clarence, I understand this is hard for you, but you're not the only person in Vernon's life. He has a future, and he's allowed to pursue it. You need to stop making this about you. I hadn't made it about me. I hadn't reached out to anyone except in a private online space where I vented anonymously, just trying to understand what I was supposed to do next. Yet somehow, she knew. Which meant Vernon had been reading my posts and passing them on. The last conversation I tried to have with Vernon was quiet and civil. I asked him, point blank, if he felt bad about how he handled things. He shook his head. I don't want to get into all that before I go. I don't need the drama. That was the word again, drama. Like I was performing instead of reacting. Like being left behind didn't justify an emotional response. A few days later, our cousin sent me a screenshot. It was from a farewell dinner group chat one Vernon's friends had created to plan his send-off. Everyone was in it. Old college friends, co-workers, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. My name wasn't there. I messaged him.
Didn't think I'd want to come? His reply came back fast. Given how you've been acting, I figured you wouldn't want to be there. I didn't answer. A few hours later, I got an email from our shared streaming account. Your profile has been removed. I stared at it. That petty little move told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just leaving. They were wiping the slate clean, and I wasn't part of the new story. A week after the group chat fallout, I learned Vernon's departure date had changed. He was leaving 2 weeks earlier than expected. No announcement. No update. I only found out when a mutual friend, Jared, casually mentioned it in conversation. Thought you knew, he said. I didn't. Of course I didn't. I checked Vernon's social media, and there it was, a countdown on Linda's page. 10 days until our new beginning. So ready to leave the past behind. The comments were full of encouragement and excitement, friends cheering them on, talking about how proud they were, how brave they were to make such a leap. Meanwhile, I was sitting at the kitchen table, refreshing budgeting spreadsheets, wondering if I could afford groceries and rent that week. Then my phone rang. It was Mom again. Clarence, I know things have been rough, but we really want you to come to the airport and see Vernon off. I almost laughed. They were serious. They wanted me to show up, smile, say goodbye, and pretend everything was fine, all for appearances. He's still your brother, Dad said, joining in. Family shows up, no matter what. I refused. Mom sighed. You'll regret this someday. Then she hung up. A few hours later, I got a message from my landlord. A reminder that the full rent was due in 2 weeks. No exceptions. If I couldn't pay, I'd need to vacate. There'd be no leniency this time. That night, Vernon posted a long caption about the meaning of family and how he was grateful to have such a strong support system. It felt surreal. The same brother who had left me to pick up the pieces of our shared life was now waxing poetic about togetherness. That's when I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Theodore, an old college friend of Vernon's. He and Vernon had once roomed together, and after seeing my post in a forum, he reached out. This isn't the first time Vernon's done this, he said. We talked for nearly an hour. As it turned out, years ago, Vernon had done the same thing to him. They'd lived together, split expenses, made plans. And one day, Vernon had met Linda, and within weeks, he was gone and moved out with barely a heads up, leaving Theodore to handle rent alone. A pattern. Not an isolated mistake. Later that week, I stopped by a local cafe, one of the places Vernon and I used to go together. I grabbed a table in the back, trying to get some work done. That's when I heard her voice. Linda. She was sitting a few tables away, speaking loudly on a call. She hadn't seen me. She was laughing. He's just so emotionally dependent. It's honestly kind of embarrassing. He'll get over it eventually. She was talking about me. I didn't confront her. I just quietly stood, gathered my things, and left before she could notice. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I started digging, not through her social media, but through timelines. I rechecked Vernon's calendar, events we had shared. Old texts. Dates of job interviews he had vaguely mentioned. And it all clicked. He had been planning this for months, before the dinner, before the first family conversation, before even pretending to be undecided. He had accepted the job weeks before he told me he was still considering things. He had signed contracts, negotiated details, and packed things into storage while I was busy thinking we were still in it together. It had never been a sudden opportunity. It had always been intentional silence. I tried calling the landlord the next morning just to see if there was anything he could offer. A grace period. A payment plan. But there wasn't. I needed to pay or move out. Then Linda sent me one last message. At least now you can finally be independent. Good luck. I blocked her immediately. And that's when the final blow came. I found out my parents had helped Vernon financially with the move. Flights. Deposits. Startup costs. When I'd asked them for help with 1 month of rent, they told me I should have planned better. Linda made another post that night to Vernon, suitcase in hand, grinning like he had won the lottery. So proud of my love for following his dreams. No mention of what they'd left behind. I stared at it for a while, then closed the app. For the first time in my life, I began wondering if Vernon had ever really been the brother I believed he was, or if I had just filled in the blanks with hope. The day he left, I did go to the airport. Not for Vernon. For myself. I wanted closure. He stood near the gate, beaming as friends gathered around him. Linda was right there, snapping pictures and whispering in his ear. When he saw me, he blinked like he hadn't expected me to show up. "Hey," I said. "So, you really just left me with everything, huh?" He exhaled, looking vaguely irritated. "We'll talk soon." That was it. No apology. Just another vague promise. As I turned to leave, I heard Linda murmur behind me, "This is for the best." I didn't respond. I didn't look back. Later that evening, Mom called. She said I had been cold. That Linda had told her I was standoffish. She was just trying to protect Vernon's peace, she said. "You really need to stop holding on to resentment." I hung up. The next morning, my landlord's final notice was waiting in my inbox. 2 weeks. Pay up or move out. No exceptions.
Meanwhile, Vernon's social media was full of their new life, museums, street cafes, hashtags about growth and gratitude.
No mention of me. Then came the post that broke whatever was left. A picture of Vernon and Linda clinking glasses at dinner. So happy we're finally free. I wasn't the only one who saw it.
Uncle Harris, quiet and observant, commented on the post in our family group chat.
Free from what? Responsibility? And just like that, everything exploded. Aunts chimed in. Cousins weighed in. Some defended Vernon. Others didn't. Mom tried to calm things down. This bitterness is making things harder for everyone. But it was already clear. This wasn't just Vernon's betrayal anymore. My parents had made their choice. And it wasn't me.
With my back against the wall, I had no choice but to act fast. I spent days reaching out to everyone I knew, digging through old contacts, job boards, and housing listings.
The silence from my family was deafening, yet oddly freeing. There was no one left to disappoint. No one left to wait on.
Then a message came through from my old friend Glenn. We hadn't spoken in years, but he had seen my name pop up in a roommate inquiry group. "I've got a spare room," he wrote. "Not much, but it's clean and safe.
If you need it, it's yours."
I don't think he knew what that offer meant to me at the time.
It was hope.
I packed my things, not that I had much. A suitcase of clothes, a box of books, and a few keepsakes.
The apartment Vernon and I had once shared now felt like a memory I couldn't quite trust. Leaving it wasn't hard.
It was letting go of the idea of it that took more work. The day before I left, my parents showed up at my doorstep without warning.
Mom looked tired. Dad stood stiffly behind her.
"You don't have to do this," she said, softly.
"Family is supposed to come first." I didn't say anything.
"You're making a mistake," Dad added.
"You're running away when you should be facing things head-on." But I had faced things. I'd faced months of silence, gaslighting, and abandonment. I had faced the truth.
So I picked up my bag, walked past them, and shut the door.
That night, I made one last call to Vernon. He answered.
"What now?" he said, his voice low, exhausted.
I didn't speak.
I let the silence hang for a moment, then quietly hung up. A few days after I moved, I got another call from my parents.
They weren't checking in.
They weren't asking how I was settling into my new place.
They had something else to say.
"Clarence," my father said, "you need to accept that Vernon will always be the one who finds his way.
He's the golden child. That's just how things are." They didn't say it to hurt me. That was the worst part. They believed it was simply truth. I ignored the call. Later that week, my Aunt Denise called. She was one of the few who had supported me quietly from the sidelines. She had something to tell me.
"Linda's been talking," she said. According to Denise, Linda had twisted everything, the move, the apartment, the fallout, into a tale where I had tried to sabotage Vernon's success. She told people I'd caused a scene at the airport, that I was obsessed, jealous, and unwell.
None of it was true. I wasn't even surprised. I unfollowed Vernon. I blocked Linda. I even muted my parents on social media.
There was nothing left for me in that digital space of curated falsehoods. A week later, Vernon messaged me again.
"Hope you're doing okay." I didn't reply.
Then came the moment I never expected, an admission from my mother. "Maybe we didn't handle things the right way," she said during a short, tense call.
It wasn't an apology.
But it was the closest she had ever come.
By then, it didn't matter.
Linda, once so loud online, had gone quiet. Her influencer dreams had stalled.
Her videos stopped getting traction.
Her curated captions no longer inspired engagement. She faded into the background not because of hate, but because people stopped caring.
Vernon stayed behind, drifting from one part-time job to the next. He was no longer the brother I knew. No longer the center of attention.
Just a man who had left behind his support system for something that didn't last. Then, months later, opportunity knocked again, but this time, for me.
A new job. A new city. A new chance. I accepted.
Before I left, Vernon messaged me once more.
I guess I wasn't the best brother. Hope you're good. I stared at it. Then I deleted it. No response. No second chances. My life in the new city wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No tangled expectations. No guilt.
Just clean air, quiet nights, and friendships that felt real again.
Eventually, Vernon returned to town.
Word got around quickly he'd come back alone, no job, no plan.
Lisa had left him.
Packed her bags in the middle of the night and went home without saying goodbye. He'd moved back in with our parents.
That's when they tried again, another call. Could you let Vernon stay with you for a while? Mom asked.
He just needs some space to figure things out.
I said no. Then came Vernon himself, standing outside my building one evening.
He looked older, thinner, worn down by something he still didn't want to name. I just need a place for a bit, he said.
Until I get back on my feet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat.
I simply said, no, and closed the door.
The calls from my parents came fast after that. Angry voicemails. Accusations. Disappointment. But they stopped eventually.
Because they saw what others had started seeing too. Vernon's fall wasn't a matter of bad luck. It was a pattern. Even extended family who once defended him had grown quiet.
Some cut him off.
Others unfollowed him. The illusion had cracked, and what was left behind wasn't someone who needed rescuing, it was someone who had burned too many bridges. I later learned Linda had moved on, she'd found someone new, rebranded her life, and deleted every trace of Vernon from her accounts.
He'd become a footnote in her story. And I was finally the main character in my own. My job was solid. My friendships, stronger than ever.
My home felt like a safe space.
No walking on eggshells.
No waiting for another betrayal. Months passed, and Vernon's last attempt came through a simple message.
I really messed up. I wish I could take it back. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to.
Because I had already forgiven him, not to welcome him back, but to free myself from the weight of his choices. And as I sat on my balcony, a quiet city below me, I realized something.
He didn't break me. He revealed me. And I was stronger than I ever knew.
Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.